I would like to thank organizer for inviting me again to participate in NextRise event. Unfortunately, we cannot do it in person this year, but I look forward to interact with participants online. I look forward to hear from you, and I hope that my presentation and our interaction will be useful. My name is Dr. Eugene Buff. I am a founder and president of Primary Care Innovation Consultant. And for over 20 years, I've been working on technology commercialization and helping innovators to be successful. So I just mentioned three fundamental concepts that we'll be talking about today: technology, innovation, and success. Technology is a very simple concept. We can define it as basically any scientific knowledge that could be applied for practical purposes. It's very easy to talk about success as well. We're in a business conference. We're business people. So success for the business means sales. Nothing happens without sales. To be successful, we need to be selling our services as technology. But what about innovation? What does it mean? What's a good and useful and practical definition of innovation? Unfortunately, I think a lot of companies and innovators themselves, and definitely the managers, sometimes misdefine the innovation. And the dictionary is not much of the help here. As you can see from on this clip from the dictionary, innovation defined as the action or process of being innovating. Very helpful. And a lot of companies are misusing that. This is actually probably one of the most misused words that you can hear. And it's definitely getting very, very overused. But what's the definition? So let's try to put it in a Google and see what we can come up with. So this is just a few definitions of innovation I found in my recent search. One defined it as the new products, business processes, and organic changes that create wealth or social welfare. A little heavy. The simplest one on this list is probably innovation is commercialization of invention. That I think is something that we can all relate to, and this type of definition comes up very often. But it's not very useful, it's not very practical. Yet, if we pull together all those different definitions, and I suggest you try to find more or even came up with your own definition, but they all point on two very distinctive and very important features of an innovation. First of all, innovation needs to be fresh. It's not needs to be new, original, or at least something that didn't existed before. It needs to be something improved. But the second aspect of innovation is as important, if not more important, than being fresh. And it's about being useful. Innovation must create value. That means that when we're talking about the scientific research or research and development, none of those activities actually by definition would result in innovation. I want to introduce you another important feature of the innovation that I find very useful for practical purposes. I consider innovation being a process versus an invention that's just an event. Why it's important? Well, if nothing else, it's very hard, if not impossible, to predict and plan for an invention or discovery or a breakthrough. You can, of course, write on your calendar tomorrow, 10 a.m. discovery, but I doubt it will actually happen. We can talk separately about how you prepare your organization to be susceptible to discoveries and inventions. But there is very little you can do to increase the number and make sure that your discoveries or inventions are successful. If we're looking at the innovation the same way, then we're kind of left with a fate. But if you want to be behind the wheel of the innovation, we can look at it as a process. That means that we can improve it, that we can repeat it, we can learn from ours and others' mistakes, and we can make it better, meaning more successful. This idea of the innovation as a process came to me after reading a very large cover piece in Wall Street Journal several years ago. The Wall Street Journal discussed that we probably run out of the big ideas, and that's the reason of the trouble. On the other hand, they say that there is plenty of knowledge to go around, and the ideas are there. There is a lot of intellectual property. Patents been filed. This graph shows how many patents have been filed in the United States Patent Office over several decades. The graph is almost exponential. There is some capital to go around. Yes, it was before the current crisis and the COVID pandemic, but there is still plenty of venture capital to go for the great invention. So what's the source of the trouble? Wall Street Journal said the reason for all this trouble with innovation is that we really don't know what we're doing. They say that innovation comes through trial and error. And that makes it very similar to the invention. It means that we really don't know what we're doing. We are victims of luck. Is that the case? Well, it definitely proves with the number of the failures that we can see around. Over 90% of the startups fail consistently. There is a very low efficiency of ideas becoming the successful businesses. Only few in a million, says one source. There are a lot of bankruptcies, and very, very small percentage of inventions and venture businesses ever return their investment. The efficiency of the ideas is been quoted as one of the most severe problem with the failures. Only 1 or 2 successes coming out of thousands, if not more, of the interesting and innovative inventions. So what are the reasons for those failures? There are quite a few surveys that's been done in the last years, and you can see some of the reasons listed by managers, entrepreneurs, and CEOs of the companies. We can actually combine some of them together on the right picture. Look at them. No market need. User unfriendly product. Product without business model. Ignore the customer. Product mistimed. All those reasons actually could probably be combined in one very, very disturbing reason on the left pie chart. And that is that the companies are doing something that nobody needs or wants. This sounds very, very strange and counterintuitive. But that has been quoted, and I think it is the main source of the failure of innovation. The companies and innovators doing something that nobody needs. So my main message for today's presentation is that innovation is actually the game of what people needs, or what does he needs, and not what have I got. So it's not the solution in search of the problem that we very often come in technology commercialization and in technology transfer. Innovation needs to be the game of what does he need. But who is he? Who that person is? Well, that person calls a customer or a client. In some business literature, you probably find that people define those terms differently, but I consider this is the same concept. Clients or the customer, I use those words interchangeably, and there are several important things about them. First of all, as I mentioned, customer is always a person. Customer is never an organization or company or industry, and that's the person whom we give our technology for use, who we give our innovation to solve their problem, and in exchange for that solution, they pay money. This is a very simple and a very fundamental definition of the customer. Why are we even spending time on that? That seems obvious. Well, it turns out that there is another group of people that we need to take into account, and those people called end user. And those people are the actual people who take our technology, our product, our service, our innovation, and use them. Are these the same people as the customers? Yeah, the customers paying, users using. Well, the good news is in many situations, this is the same person. For example, in the consumer products, sometimes in electronics, in automotive, very often end user and the customer is the same person. We can run into trouble when these are two different people. And it's important because the customer is the one who should we focus on. We should be solving the problem of the customer, not the end user. If you're looking for examples, think about the toy industry. You're making the toys for children. They're your obvious end users. But are they buying this? Are they paying you for these toys? Of course not. That means that they are not the customer. The customers are the parents. And you suddenly come into the very interesting conclusion that the toy industry is actually not solving problems for the children. They're solving problems for parents. And that's very, very important. In similar situation you run in almost all the situations when you deal with healthcare industry, medical devices, therapeutics. The customer and the end users are almost always two different people. And as much as we need to take care of the end user and make sure that they like and use our innovation, we do need to focus on the customer, because these are the people whose problem we're supposed to solve. But there's an even more interesting idea that I want to introduce you. It's not just the needs that we need to solve for the customer. We need them to hire our product, our innovation, to do something for them. There is a very famous quote that was attributed to Theodore Levitt, the Harvard Business School professor, in 1962. And he said that people do not need a quarter-inch drill. They need a quarter-inch hole. What it basically means that the customers are actually not buying our products or services, but they're hiring those to do something for them, to do a job for them. This is a very, very important concept that has been developed a lot in the last several years by Clayton Christensen and other people that worked in his lab, in particular Anthony Ulrich and Steven Winker. So the jobs are part of this problem, but jobs are very, very specific actions that the customer would hire our innovation to do for them. And we need to have very, very clear understanding what it is. What's important to remember is that there are different types of jobs. The some that are pretty obvious are called functional. This is something that we can probably easily understand. There is something that needs to be really done physically, functionally to solve the problem. But a lot of jobs are actually emotional. They could be personal or social, and we can never discard them. A lot of those needs and jobs need to be looked very, very different before we try to introduce our innovation to solve them. Why it's all important? Well, this is my concept of how you can innovate properly. You basically do not want to squish the improperly shaped product into the market need, into the problem. And I even usually say more dramatically, I say if you can describe the problem, the need, if you can have a good list of jobs to be done perfectly, the solution is almost obvious. I actually bring the jigsaw puzzle analogy to that. I hope you all have some experience with jigsaw puzzles, especially after this long time of self-isolation. And as you know, a big part of the puzzle is usually composed of the picture or the pattern. And this is how you can find the right piece. But then there is always a large part of the puzzle that is just have no pattern. It's a sky or sea. And the only way you can find the right piece is by the shape of the whole. This is my advice. This is my approach to how you define the successful innovation process. You need to define this whole, which is a market need, the customer need. And the shape of this whole will consist of the particular jobs to be done with particular requirements and a criteria that the only customer can give you. And if you know exactly the shape of that whole, to find this one little piece, your innovation, your successful innovation, out of the big pile of different technologies and invention is much, much easier and will result in much higher efficiency in our process. This is not a new concept. There are a lot of people been talking about this, but this is a basic concept that I push as a consultant, as an educator, mentor, and I suggest you to turn this whole innovation process upside down. Start from defining your customer, figuring out whose problem are you solving. Then try to define and describe that problem in terms of jobs to be done. Figure out which ones of those jobs are not done properly but currently available solution, and that will define the opportunity for you to innovate. Remember, most of the current failures come from the fact that companies are doing something that nobody needs. If you start the innovation process the way I suggest you totally eliminate that cause, because whatever you come up with, will be a perfect fit to this customer problem at the particular time with a particular specification that needs to be done. So then the formula for successful innovation becomes reasonably simple. Follow customers home. Only customers will know their problems. It's a different story how to get that information, how to talk to them, and unfortunately we don't have time to get into all the details of those points. But you do need to engage and talk to your customer as early in your innovation process as possible. Number two, don't try to do everything. We all have limited resources, expertise, and experiences. Look for collaborators. This is the reality we all live in. And we discussed that as in many other sessions at this conference. This is the reality of open innovation. Do what you do best, and for everything else, look for partners and collaborators. Try to stay small. The lean model means that you can turn around quickly and respond to the changes on the market. The customers are living people. The problems change. And if you cannot change your business and your technology quickly enough, you will get into trouble. And we've seen quite a lot of examples when the large companies lately are not able to adapt into the quickly moving and changing landscape and the customer situation, and they die. And the last point is worth definitely a separate discussion altogether, but I would like to mention it, is that try to be disruptive. But remember that disruption is a strategy. It's not the function of your technology, it's the way you approach your customers and your market. This is basically what I do as a consultant. I introduced this new process that I called Innovation Navigator that helps you to go through those steps of the customer-driven approach to innovation. You start with customer discovery, you figure out what the needs are, you formulate them properly in actionable way. If needed, you can pivot very quickly without much of the investment of time and resources. And at the end, you can do successful marketing and get to the very, very successful deals at a much higher efficiency and with much higher success rate that we currently have. I wish you good luck, and I hope to hear from you, and we'll be happy to respond to all of your questions and comments. And see you in person next year.